this. And it's like, well, it forces you to think outside of what you normally will, and so that you can, as much as you're working out physically, you're also working out mentally, so that you are looking at things in a different way that most people may not.
And you have these like hypotheses that you develop, but then you're also hypothesis testing in real time, where you have an idea, you're going to get immediate feedback. For somebody that their sole goal is to stifle and prevent whatever idea you have from working. So you very quickly kind of learn the value in, like, 'cause you can spend years and years drilling, but until you go out there and start rolling and you have that immediate sort of feedback, I mean, you realize how valuable that is, and you learn the best. You get these instincts where, like, oh, I think I learned best like this. Like, when I kind of learn in this way, this seems to work really well in this situation. And like with school for me, I mean, with learning judo, I feel like when I started college and everything, I was a better learner than most of my peers because I'd been obsessing over learning judo on my own. And so you get out of high school, go to college, you don't have a teacher, making you do stuff. You don't have your parents making sure you're studying. All throughout high school, I was just devouring, learning, and kind of it's almost like a natural selection of learning processes, like what works well, what doesn't. Are you a reader? Are you a visual learner? Are you you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah.
No, it's true. There's so many people that learn in so many different ways. Like, as much as you think that, everyone's supposed to read this book, and they'll learn it and they'll, have it in their brain. Well, there's a part of the class where if it's read to them or if it's explained in a different way, they learn audibly, or they see, maybe pictures are better for certain people when it comes to certain things. So, the fact that people think that you have to learn only one way, well, that doesn't work for everybody. So you can't learn just one way.
And I realized that because I felt like I could learn in judo, like quickly on my own, watching videos, kind of dissecting them on my own time. And in class, I felt like I couldn't sort of, learn things as comprehensively when they were showed. And, so when I went to college, I kind of already had that figured out. And so whenever there was a class that was optional and you could go, or I wouldn't waste the time going to the lecture if I had the resources to learn on my own, because I knew that would be a better use of my time and more productive. And I feel like with a lot of people out there, like, you kind of get people either feel like, oh, this guy's smart, this guy's not, or same thing about themselves, like, oh, I'm smart, I'm dumb, whatever. But I think that sort of those assumptions would change if all of those people had the sort of like, if they all learned under the sort of methodology that worked best for them. And I think that's a huge part of, like, oh, this guy's smart. Well, like, no, this guy figured out what learning strategy worked best for him,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that really...
Because the classroom, learn really well in the class, and so, like, maybe kind of society views like, oh, these are the smart people, these are the smart guys and girls. But if it were flipped and, like, there was none of that, and then it was just the book learners, like, then those guys would be,
Yeah. Yeah, once people figure out exactly the best way that they learn, like, they are unstoppable. And I think instead of, I mean, it's unfortunate in the school system because they are so ingrained now that they have to teach for the standardized tests so that they can get, funding and stuff, which is understandable to a point, but you're also there to make sure that these students are learning something. So these kids that, they might think are behind, well, they're not. They just don't learn the same way. And then, now that we're learning more about disabilities and stuff when it comes to, the dyslexia or ADD or ADHD or autism, they're all going to learn differently as well. And so I really wish that education in this country was put more at a higher stake than it is, everywhere else in the world.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, I mean, speaking of school, you do have your doctorate. So not only have you, continue to be challenging yourself, throughout the martial arts world, but now also you are trying to get a doctorate at Stanford of all places. So,
I got it. So I finished medical school there at I guess 2019. But that was that I owe to judo, right? Because like I feel like I was a good student and stuff in high school, but I wasn't I guess the caliber that I would need to get into a place like that. And I moved to Colorado Springs after high school. I went to this state school there. The Olympic Training Center's there, so I was doing judo full time. But I felt like moving there, like I said, I had such a head start figuring out how I learned, and so I felt like a completely different learner immediately when I didn't have this. I wasn't forced to be in class, and I could just do what I knew I needed to do, and I didn't have to sort of trial it out. Like we talked about that, like that immediate feedback. Like if I didn't have, that's hard to do. If you go to college and there's only so many exams, right? You have like a midterm final or whatever. Like that's not enough time. Like, but to really test your hypotheses, like your studying methods, right? Because by the time, if you mess up a few times, well, that's your GPA can tank, right? And so, that's the like real value, I think, of like going live and whatever grappling sport you're doing is you get that every day, every round. And so, yeah, I didn't ever think I could get into a place like that, but just like, I guess grappling, learning, testing, like trying to beat these guys that are trying to come take my heads up. Like that was, I owe it all to that and like just figuring out how to learn.
Yeah. I mean, like, I'm glad you learned your process of learning early, and it is so great that judo helped you become a doctor of all things.
Yeah. It's so unexpected. And I think that's like another thing, like with, really you got to try to like learn something that you're passionate about, because that's what you're going to want to work hard at, and you're also better at things when you like them. And so that was also like when I was studying, like I kind of found ways to like trick myself into finding interest in these subjects where like I didn't like chemistry, but I forced myself to like it. And then I ended up coming to chemistry tutor and like actually liking it just by sort of adjusting how I was framing things. Like that was a big immediate sort of takeaway. It's like, oh, like I can learn these throws and these sequences if I'm interested in them. Like how can I trick myself into being interested in other things? All sorts of little tricks like that.
So you are your own guinea pig, is what you're saying.
Exactly. And and I go into the lab every day with all my other fellow guinea pig training partners.
That's good that you actually recognize that you are your own guinea pig. I mean, essentially, aren't we all our own guinea pigs? But
yeah, absolutely. But you got to test those things in a low stakes place. Like no one, if I get submitted, my ideas don't work in practice. Like okay, who cares? Like I go back and I get better. But if you're out there, like if I was out there taking the MCAT for the first time, like that is, I can't afford to mess up there, So you need a little environment where you can experiment safely,
Very true. Now, what you've done with your Instagram and your Bad Boy Medicine is almost like you're doing your own TV show where you're learning from the best in their fields on how to do certain moves, transitions, and training in general. Where did the idea to kind of pick everyone's brain and have them show you what their, just little bits of the sport and the game in general, where did all that come from?
Well, I think when I was like learning, and when I was like 15, 16, like looking at videos, I would see these sort of examples that weren't demonstrated live, and a lot of the time I found myself sort of gravitating toward the mindset of, well, would that actually work? Like I kind of need to see it to believe it. Like I need to see you do that on somebody to know that like what you're teaching me is legit. Because, there's like all sorts of people telling you all sorts of things out there. And so, I ended up just kind of like watching these YouTube highlights, in judo and then learning from that. And sometimes if I saw a guy there, I could look him up and every once in a while, once in a blue moon, he'd have sort of a breakdown of him showing something. And I love that. I love that so much, being able to see it live, you kind of prove its legitimacy, and then you tell me how you think about it. Like, I'm more likely to believe you. And so with like my Instagram, I like all the things I show are like the technique I show is like immediately after an example of me hitting that live. So because that's what I would want to see, to sort of, because like I said, there's so many people out there telling me so many different things. And so when I had opportunities, you know, to talk to people, you know, in the UFC or whatever, and I was able to see them do something. I would, like Raquel Pennington with her, bulldog choke, and because you've seen that taught, but you don't really see it pulled off very often. She's I think she was the first woman to do it, and maybe like the third or fourth or something woman or person in the UFC to do it. And so that was a cool opportunity. It's like, wow, can you show me how you do that? And like, cause I'll believe it now that I've seen you do it. That was kind of my thought process behind all of it.
I mean, it makes sense because no, good.
Like, suspicious of people not, but again, that's sort of like, I've learned to be that way with like, not just taking things at face value if somebody says something, because you're gonna read all sorts of things. Like, you need to, how do you figure out what's right and what's wrong? Like, that's a huge part of learning. Like, is this correct? And so that was big for me. And so I needed that, and I wanted to give it to other people who may also kind of have those same tendencies.
No, it makes sense. I mean, like you said, it the hypothesis is the thought, and then, you know, you're putting it into action. So you are still, you know, like you said, in the lab figuring out, okay, well, does this work? And, you know, the fact that you're seeing people do it right in front of you is your live, you know, demonstration of everything, to where you can kind of break it down. And because with this video, you can only do so much, because you're limited to what you're seeing in front of you or wherever the camera angle is. But if you're having it done right in front of you, then you can check out every angle and see, okay, well, if you do it this way, how can I maybe get out of this? Or how do you, you know, which part of the throat or underneath the neck, and which arteries are you supposed to be squeezing, or different things like that.
And like and I show the things that I think I'm right about, because I have plenty of ideas that don't work. I mean, I go up there.
Yeah, of course.
I'm trying to implement. I'm trying to figure out kind of, I guess, new ways to do things. But most of those new ideas they fail, right? Because I go out there and I'm trying something new and it doesn't work. And so that's great feedback for me. And then but then when I do find something that works, and I test it again, it works again, I show it to somebody else, it works, then I feel confident, like, okay, this is a good way to do this, and like, this is how you should consider thinking about it. Like, my favorite throw in gi and judo, or I don't know if I can say favorite, it's my favorite to watch. It's called Drop Morote Seoinage. It's like, it's one of the videos I've pinned on my Instagram, where you kind of like disappear between someone's legs and you like throw them over you. It's just so beautiful to me, and I wanted to make that throw work and no gi, and I've like been able to pull it off like a few times in certain ways, but like not in a way that I think is reliable, and so I don't show it, because I don't think it's legit yet. Maybe one day. Yeah, I mean, so many things like that I try and they don't work.
But at least you're trying to figure it out too.
That's how it goes, though. I mean, that's like when you're doing anything new and trying to invent something or trying to explore like kind of unexplored territory. It's that's just the nature of the beast.
True. I mean, at some point, all of this was uncharted territory. So
exactly. Like, same thing with medicine, man. Like, all the crazy things that we do that does work. I mean, God, can you imagine all the just like medieval torture almost like sort of scenarios that they tested that didn't work? Like, that's 99% of it. Like, can you imagine all the crazy shit out there that like has been done in some random room, like next to like, or whatever? Like, oh my God, like that's crazy. Like, all the people that had to go through all that. I mean, that's just that's just like anything.
Yeah, I mean,